It doesn't take much these days. Most people are very surprised to learn what racketeering is or is not and what is involved with it. It is usually something legally that we attach to something else because of the definitions, which I'll be glad to go into in a little bit. To be a racketeer, you must commit a pattern of racketeering activity. There is a federal racketeering statute, and there is a state racketeering statute. The federal racketeering statute, and virtually every state has a racketeering statute. The federal racketeering statute is called RICO, for the acronym or the shorthand. Stands for Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. And it was passed in the 1960s. And then it spawned the state acts. Now, the Colorado Act, which I'll use for some of my examples today, along with the Federal Act. The Colorado Act has an acronym of COCCA, C-O-C-C-A. I think that's the Colorado Organized Crime Control Act, so COCCA. In the 1960s, after RICO was passed and litigation started, people who were accused of it said, I'm not mafia. This act was designed for the mafiosa and for really bad things like kidnapping and murder and extortion and interstate kidnapping and a long list of things that are rather nasty. Well, it took 10 years for the Supreme Court to clear up that the racketeering statutes were far broader than just being mafiosa. In the end, the U.S. Supreme Court said Congress defined racketeering and racketeering activity and pattern of racketeering conduct. They defined it in the statute. And we are bound by the words used by Congress. Racketeering activity federally means any act or threat involving all kinds of things. Now it starts with involving murder, kidnapping, gambling, arson, robbery, bribery, extortion, dealing in obscene matter, or dealing in a controlled substance or listed chemical as defined in the Controlled Substances Act. Oh, that's drug dealing. Which is chargeable under state law and punishable by imprisonment for more than 1 year. It also means any act which is indictable, means you could be indicted criminally under any of the following provisions of the United States Code. The list is over a page long. Theft from interstate shipments, embezzlement from pension and welfare funds, extortion of credit transactions, fraud, and related activity, whatever that is, in connection with identification documents, fraud, and related activity in connection with access devices, transmission of gambling information. And now we get to my favorites under the United States Code, Title 18, Section 1341, mail fraud, and Section 1343, wire fraud. We're going to come back to both of these. The list includes things like reproduction of naturalization or citizenship papers, offenses relating to the sale of naturalization or citizenship papers, false statements in the application and use of passports, the economic espionage and theft of trade secrets, activity relating to engaging in money transactions in property derived from specified unlawful activity. Oh, white slave traffic is in the list. I don't see here black or brown slave traffic in the list in this statute, but one has to dive deeper. Offenses relating to biological weapons, chemical weapons, nuclear material. The other favorite one that I like to use, fraud in the sale of securities. Now that generally excludes securities that are sold in the open market on a national exchange or a regional exchange, with some exceptions perhaps if you're gaining control of a company by it. Any act which is indictable under Currency and Foreign Transactions Reporting Act, money laundering, all kinds of good things. So it covers all kinds of activity. Now, let's talk about fraud by wire and fraud by mail, because those two items in securities fraud is what I most frequently see and encounter. And this is attendant to someone engaging in fraudulent activity in some manner. Now, someone who commits a fraud, usually it is not a one-time act. It seems, at least in my experience and the people I go after and get recoveries from, it seems to be a habitual act, a repeated act that they do over and over. So when I go to 18 United States Code 1343, fraud by wire, radio, or television, whosoever having devised or intending to devise any scheme or artifice to defraud, or for obtaining money or property by means of false or fraudulent pretenses, representations, or promises, transmits or causes to be transmitted by means of wire, radio, or television communication in interstate or foreign commerce any writing, signs, signals, pictures, or sounds for the purpose of executing such scheme or artifice, shall be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Also, all of a sudden, this gets to be real serious. 20 years if convicted criminally. The federal RICO statute and state statutes have both a criminal component and a civil component. The civil component, it makes available a private right of action if you've been affected by this. We do not have to have a criminal conviction. When I read these definitions a little earlier to you, I said it's indictable. It means it could be indicted. Doesn't mean I have to have been indicted or that I have to have been convicted or that I had to have pled guilty or I had to have done a no-low plea or any of that. It means it could have happened. Now, to be convicted criminally, of course, takes a burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's not the case on the civil side. Under the federal statute on the civil side, I just have to prove you violated that criminal statute by a preponderance of the evidence, a feather's weight of difference in the evidence. For the state statute, at least in Colorado, it's a middle ground of clear and convincing evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt. Well, you know, if I send an email to you as part of our dealings about the money you're going to send to me or the investment you're going to make or whatever it is that's going on, guess what? That's a wire in interstate commerce. Oh, email. But if I'm communicating about our dealings on Facebook or Twitter or cell phone calls or an SMS text message, they're all wire transmissions in interstate commerce. Oh, and then to move the money, if I wire transfer it through my bank, that too is a wire in interstate commerce. And lest you get carried away, mind you, I do get excited about this stuff, but lest you get carried away and say, oh, but we're both in one state, so it's not interstate. Well, there's a body of case law that covers that and says, yes, but you used instrumentalities of interstate commerce to effectuate this scheme, and so we're still going to come after you. Well, now you can start to see how easy it is to get caught up in racketeering.